Hi, welcome everyone to Pop Cult X. This week, Danny is stepping out for some special reasons, but we have a special guest. We have Terry Blas, the insider, creator, writer, illustrator of Reptile, Hotel Dare. What are some of the other books that I've purchased off of Hotel Dare, Lifetime Passes, a lot of stuff. You're very you've worked in the industry, let's call it that. And so we wanted to talk about Black Panther. Danny has not seen Black Panther. I have, Terry has, so we wanted to talk about that. So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you once again for joining us here. You are a previous guest of ours, and we enjoy having you and you sharing your opinion. So once again, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to chat about this.
So, first impressions, did it live up to the hype for you? I know that, like a lot of us, I think your expectations were probably high.
Yeah, I had pretty high expectations. I think that it lived up to it. I guess, like with all the Mesoamerican stuff, definitely lived up to it. Some parts of the story I thought were probably like, not that I could tell. I mean, I think that Ryan Coogler is an amazing filmmaker, but I feel like some parts of the story obviously were probably they had to be heavily altered because of the death of Chadwick Boseman. So I felt like there were a few moments where you're like, all right, okay, but what can you do? But it did live up to the hype. I was really, really excited to go see it. I made it like a whole special thing. I like snuck in candy. I got myself popcorn. I had like great seats. The one thing that I thought was really surprising to me was that I like going to the movies used to be my favorite thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I used to do it like twice a week. And I think now when I go to the movies, even if there's only a few people in the theater, inevitably there's someone on their phone. There's someone talking through the whole thing. So now it's just like not a great experience. But everyone was incredibly silent during this movie. Mm-hmm. It was really interesting to feel like comfortable in the theater again with like being able to enjoy the movie and not feel like I'm definitely one of those people that I can't go to a movie opening night with a crowd of people that are excited about it. I can't do it. I don't want to do it. And so I think obviously these Marvel movies are, they're going to be exciting. They're going to be these big spectacles. I think that has that's a big part of, that whole discussion regarding filmmakers who are like, Marvel movies are ruining cinema and this and that, whatever. And it's like, no, I think that what's happening is that it's just expensive to go to the movies now.
Yeah.
And so, people will pay a lot of money to go to a theme park. Mm-hmm. So if they're going to pay a lot of money to go to a movie, they want it to be this like adventure spectacle thing. So a lot of, I think unfortunately, a lot of indie movies and a lot of smaller budget films, I think, are relegated to streaming or, people don't go see them in theaters. I think that's what's happening. So if it could somehow not cost, $1 million to go to the movies, I think that would change things quite a bit. Yeah. But I digress. I'm getting off track. I really did like the movie. What did you think?
I loved it. I think that there's a couple of things that everyone is sort of discussing. First and foremost, I think everyone was really kind of waiting with bated breath about how they were going to deal with the passing of Chadwick Boseman. Were they going to, pay homage to him respectfully? And I think they did an excellent job. I'm not an overly emotional person, but there were times when I started crying in the movie. It was very emotional for me. I think that Chadwick was a really special person, a very special actor. The role of Black Panther means so much to so many different people that it was something that was very sensitive, and I thought they dealt with it in a really good way. How do you feel about that? Did they drop the ball? Did they honor Chadwick appropriately?
No, I think they did everything they could possibly do, and that it was done really well. Yeah, I don't know what else they could have done. It seemed like it was done with so much, and the way that the cast talks about the movie and interviews and stuff, it seems like they were all really there for each other and supporting each other and trying to make the best film they could, because they felt that's what he would, want them to do. So yeah, I really thought they did a great job with respecting and kind of like remembering him and what he meant to that franchise and to the different communities that he represents. So yeah, I think so.
I think the other thing that people were really excited about was where does this franchise go? Do they recast? Are they does Black Panther disappear? Obviously, spoiler alert for people.
Yeah, we're gonna spoil everything.
Shuri becomes, a form of, the next Black Panther. What are your thoughts about that? A female Black Panther,
Oh, I'm all for a female Black Panther. Let me just say, like, of course, I'm all for that. I think that's great. Anyone who is crying about it has obviously never read the comics. Mm-hmm. Obviously doesn't know that she does become the Black Panther in some of the comics. I don't mind Shuri being the Black Panther. Mm-hmm. I just thought that it was done in such a strange way. Mm-hmm. Because it's she, in my opinion, what happens in the film, spoilers again, everybody is that she becomes the Black Panther out of rage and the need for revenge. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that didn't feel super earned. Like, when someone's doing it for the wrong reasons, how are you rooting for them? You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think in a way that probably mirrors what's happening in the film with Namor. So I think obviously there's sort of that balance of the two of them. But I mean, I don't think people want to hear my ideas.
We do. We definitely do. I mean, that's why we brought you here, because we respect your opinion. So feel free.
So I knew. I mean, I knew, like everybody else, that she would be the next Black Panther. Right. That they didn't seem to be, really hiding it that bad. But I would have loved for Angela Bassett to become the next Black Panther. I would think that would have been awesome. And yeah, in the film, with what happens to her, I think that happens in order to get Shuri on her path to like needing revenge and being really angry. But it seemed to me like in the beginning, when Shuri is trying to make a new version of like the heart-shaped herb or whatever, mm-hmm. and she's not able to do it to save her brother, it seemed to me like, with Ramonda drowning, that could have been a moment for her to try the heart-shaped herb again, and this time Shuri is able to do it and save her mom. Right. And then I would have hoped that, taking that herb, it would have given the queen the strength to become the Black Panther. I don't know. I think, especially because it seems to me that when they cast a hero in the MCU and the actor playing this hero is a woman, they seem to cast like 10 to 15 years younger than a lot of the older men that are in the MCU. Yeah. And I don't understand that. It's like, I don't know if this is true, but the rumor I heard was that Katie Sackhoff from Battlestar Galactica went in for the role of Captain Marvel, and they told her she was too old. Wow. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, she's younger than Robert Downey Jr. Yeah. Are you telling me that you don't think Angela Bassett could kick ass? Like,
yeah, I am the biggest fan of Angela Bassett. Same. I mean, from when I was a kid, my dream casting of the X-Men was always
everyone.
Storm.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah.
Halle Berry, God bless her, was not my ideal vision of what Storm represents to me. Angela Bassett is, I feel like it's an Academy Award deserving performance in the movie.
She's really good in it.
Slays the role. I mean, just, you can feel her heartbreak, her anger, her protectiveness. She is Queen Ramonda in the movie. I mean, she just was amazing. I think that one of the things that I not that I had a problem with Shuri becoming Black Panther, but the thing that I think might have been an issue is that Letitia Wright didn't really want to be Black Panther. That I think that I've heard, that she felt uncomfortable taking the mantle from Chadwick, that she was so heartbroken, and I feel like I can kind of see that in a way, and that there was only so many things that they can do right by Chadwick. One of them following the comics and letting the sister become Black Panther. But maybe as an actress and as a friend of Chadwick, maybe she didn't really feel that she could fill that role.
Well, it's likely not what she intended on signing up for either.
Right.
To be in this bench,
Yeah. And so, but I am all for strong female superheroes, especially people of color. So I'm anxious to see more of her. and I don't want to kind of jump to the end of the movie, but I hope that we see more of Shuri as Black Panther before they sort of segue into the next generation of Black Panther. Like, give her justice in that character. I mean, in
Yeah.
that role, because
Well,
they're
especially considering this film, because I feel like we do need to see her in the role of Black Panther being an honorable leader versus I'm gonna rip your face off. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yeah, I did. There was something though that as someone who is a person of color, uh, that I related to both characters having a lot of rage and it being equated to bad or evil, and as people of color, we're always told that we have to rise above the hate, we have to be better, we have to. And it reminds me of when I went to school, we read The Merchant of Venice, and the character Shylock, where his life is turned upside down by the protagonist, and he's very much the antagonist of the book or the play. And he says, I'm demanding my pound of flesh. Like, he wants his revenge. And in my class, with a bunch of white people and a white professor, the discussion was very much that he's horrible, like he's evil, he's demanding a literal pound of flesh. And I thought, well, hell, like, he's had his daughter stolen from him, he's had his money, his career. Like, I could see that rage. I could see that he wants what's fair. But
Yeah.
society always tells us no, like, we have to let go, we have to be better, turn the other cheek. And it's so I can kind of see that the benefit of not letting that go, and just and constantly being like the Professor X style
Yeah.
of like forgiveness, and humanity can do so much better. But
Well, I feel like knowing that means that you can't call Namor a villain. You
yeah,
know,
to me, he wasn't a villain at all.
I didn't feel that way either.
Yeah.
Like,
And I guess to that's the other topic that people are discussing is so many people relate to Namor that they're saying this is his film, that this is the appearance of an Iron Man, of the Scarlet Witch. Like, this is an iconic moment for him versus maybe Shuri and Black Panther. I agree. Like, to me, he made the film. And I definitely don't see him as a villain. And I don't know. How do you feel about that? That an indigenous character is defending his kingdom. Maybe he does some wrong things. He murders the queen, but
oh, see, I'm not in that camp. I'm not in that camp. Because so many people I know, so many Latinos who, like, I think, should really love this representation and be excited about it. Like, he killed the queen. I'm like, no, he just like put a bunch of water in the throne room. She willingly swam down to get Riri. So, like, he didn't drown her. She drowned. I don't know. And so, like, I'm not in the camp that he killed her at all. But I was just, I don't know how else to say it other than, like, I feel like even if this hadn't been great, and it was great, it was amazing. Yeah. Even if it hadn't been great, I would have paid to go see it, because I feel like as Latinos, we have to get our representation crumbs wherever we can. Yeah. And for a film that's going to be this big and probably would have made all the money in the world anyway without Latinos supporting it, I feel like the only way we can combat, a film where, like, if this hadn't been great, to get more representation would be to support it anyway and show executives that films with people of color make way more money than they think they do. Mm-hmm. A lot of discussion has been made about how Black Panther legitimately led to Crazy Rich Asians, led to The Woman King being greenlit. Mm-hmm. And these movies are doing well and making a lot of money. And I don't, how do I put this? I was emotional watching this character's introduction, have it be Mesoamerican. Like, I'm white passing, fine. And I am white. My dad's white. My mom's also like 85% Native American. She's descended from Aztec Indians. I don't claim to have indigenous like I don't claim to be indigenous because that wasn't my experience, but
Mhm.
I'm comfortable saying that I have indigenous ancestry. I
Yeah.
grew up in a house where like my parents had figurines and statues of like Aztec warriors, of Mayan artifacts, like like it, and I just didn't ever really think I would see in a Marvel film a character with that kind of representation and background on display the way I did.
Yeah.
Like it showed them playing like the underwater, playing the like Aztec game where they get the like cement ball through the big cement hoop,
Yeah.
and like I gasped. I was so excited, um, and I just loved seeing his backstory. I loved seeing how like he line that I think at first you may not understand, where he says like he tells Ramonda and Shuri, he's like, what right do you have to like show yourself to the world this way? And it's interesting to see how kind of what he's in a way what he's saying is like, well, Wakanda was an isolated country. Mexico was not. It became colonized by the Spanish, and and we had to leave in order to survive. And so I think what he's telling them is like, you were never colonized. You don't really know what it's like to have to survive this way. And I think that's what makes him not a villain. He's trying to like save his people who could have been wiped out. And I think
Right.
there's this myth. A lot of people think like, oh, the Aztec and Mayan civilizations are this ancient, long gone. And there's like thousands and thousands of people who still speak Mayan who are descended from these indigenous tribes and peoples. So I loved seeing this in the film. I loved that they kind of not kind of. I loved that they called him Kukulkan, and like that they said that he was the feathered serpent god, and for the Aztecs that's Quetzalcoatl and whatnot. But I don't know. I just loved it. I want a whole movie, like a whole movie of just of about him and Talokan, and I don't know. I think it'd be really cool. So like a big part of what I do with my writing is like, especially with like Hotel Dare, is like I want fantasy inspired by things other than Europe.
Mhm.
Like I wanted a fantasy in that book that had like it was very Mexican. So the dragons were like feathered serpents and the castles were pyramids and, et cetera, et cetera. Maya and the Three does that in an amazing way on Netflix.
Mhm.
And I just feel like by default, like all of our modern fantasy that's super popular and well known in pop culture is European in its visual language. So it's
Right.
like Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Game of Thrones. Like I'll be watching one of them and my husband will be like, which one's this? They all look the same. And he's right, you know?
Yeah.
And so just by default, having a civilization, a fantasy world inspired by Mesoamerican stuff, I'm just glad that people get to see how like cool and beautiful and badass like it is and the possibilities there.
Yeah.
So
I,
yeah.
I think for me, part of going to the movie theater and sitting with people and then, reading tweets or social media posts kind of like between my fingers is I was really, really nervous because I was scared of how the reaction to the Noche Huerta was going to be, how the reaction of an indigenous superhero was going to be. And I'm so happily surprised that to me, the overwhelming um, reaction to him has been like, we fucking love it. Like people love him, people love Namor. There's obviously been a small minority, I think, that have been critical of his casting of the role, but I've been so happy that the message is now out there that one, we can have indigenous, Latinos that are dark skinned, that are lusted after, that are considered attractive,
Yes, 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 yes.
that are hot, and that can be in romantic leads, that can play the action lead, that we can have a superhero that we want the language, we want the look, we want the fantasy, the influence of the Mesoamerican people.
Yeah.
That everyone was like, yes, we want more. Like it was so cool, it was so badass. Like we love it, we love it, we love it. And the studio, I mean, hopefully from like our lips to God's ears, like make more, like we want more. Like obviously this is something that people are super open to and really like and love. So I really hope that we get to see more of him. His own film would be amazing. I would just, it would make me so happy just to see. I think that it's a phenomenon that is similar to what a lot of like Asian men face, that Mexican men or indigenous men are like asexual,
emasculated,
yeah,
asexualized.
yeah, and we know that that's not true because we live in the real world, and we know like we're getting men and women left and right. Like that's not the real case, but like to finally see it in the movies and like be like, finally, it's realistic. Like, it made me so happy just to see him.
I think it's a really interesting discussion and to have in regards to his casting, because he's an actor who, throughout Mexico, many people online try to disparage and make look bad because he is an actor with darker skin, with indigenous ancestry, who is very outspoken against many things. And for better, for worse, really, Mexico is a very colorist and oftentimes racist country. I say that having lived in Mexico, many different cities, and talking to many different family members and people. But there is a weird caste system in Mexico that's dependent upon your skin color. He said in an interview recently, when you watch TV in Mexico, it looks like a Scandinavian country.
Yeah.
Everybody's white. Because the thing that a lot of the distinction people can't make sometimes, because they don't know that many Latin people, is that Latino is not a race, it's an ethnicity. Mm-hmm. And so there are Black, white, Native, and mixed, Latinos of all, and Latinas and Latinx people of all kinds. And and what that really means is that they are perpetuating the idea that the lighter your skin is, the more valuable and beautiful you are to many different industries, even in print media and models and whatnot. I have framed on my wall somewhere, like right up here, Yalitza Aparicio on the cover of Vogue Mexico. It was the first time ever that a woman of indigenous ancestry in Mexico had been on the cover of Vogue.
Yeah.
And that's
it's
ridiculous.
Funny that you bring her up because I saw some support from Latinos saying Tenoch really deserves this. He did a great job. Unlike Yalitza, who's just lucky. She's not a good actress. She just and I thought, wow, even with like 2 steps forward, like 4 steps back, like and it was so infuriating because I'm a big fan of hers. I just saw her on Los Spookies, and
she was great in that.
Yes, like she's. I love her. And it made me sad, but I'm like, okay, focus on the positive. Like we're not going to go there because we know it exists. One of the things that kind of surprises me, and at my old age, I have to remind myself that everyone hasn't had the same life experience that I've had, but this idea of Latinos being colorist. I don't know why people are so surprised by that, because you can't really name anyone in the world, any country that isn't. Like we see it with Thailand, with Asians that try to bleach their skin, who want to stay out of the sun. We see it with, I mean, you could name anyone, and white is the preferred trait. And so it's surprising to me that people are like, did you know that Mexicans prefer lights? And it's like, well, no,
I know.
Like the whole world does. Like where have you been looking? But it is kind of a sad, I guess, realization for some. I've always grown up with it. I've always known it. Like being the brown person in my family, like
someone told me once online that I was a fake Mexican because I'm white, and I was like, have you never seen a telenovela?
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
Well, what's interesting is that you have people who in the same breath will say like, you're white, you're not Mexican, who will look at me and say like, I'm dark. And then I look at like, other movies where they say, oh, all the characters are white passing. And I'm like, white passing to me, those are Afro-Latinos. Like that, to me, that's what Afro-Latino always looked like, was people that were like darker brown that just weren't white. And then, so now it's like, I feel like we're getting more realistic representation of Latinos from like the whitest white to like black. And that people forget that that whole rainbow exists. even though we talk about it with other ethnic groups or other racial
Yeah,
groups, like with the African American community, we have
sure.
someone like Halle Berry versus someone who is very dark, but we both recognize them as being part of the African American community. But there's so much like inner fighting between Latinos that it's like you're dark, you're not dark enough, you're too dark, and you're not indigenous enough. I just feel like I wish we could see some more unity. I know that's
So
like
yeah, I think that a lot of this is an American issue as well. So I asked Claudia, a friend of mine, who did Hotel Day with me. I was like, "Are people in Mexico excited about Black Panther or about Tenoch?" And she was like, "Not really." And I was like, "Really?" And I'm sure there are plenty of people who are,
yeah,
but she was like, "No, Mexicans just like to tear each other down."
yeah,
And I was like, "That's so sad." She's like, she said they just do it because they're jealous. They think like, "Oh, you're not better than me." And I just find that to be so strange. Like, I want to be known as a Mexican who like helps lift other Mexicans up and builds people up and supports people. And I just don't understand that. I think, first of all, there's a strange connotation to the lighter skinned being more valued. And what I mean by that is I think the implication is that if you are light skinned Latino, like, oh, I must have more Spanish blood in me, right? And I'm like, so then what you're saying is you value the colonizer over the indigenous, and you think the indigenous community is less than you. And I don't understand. I don't, that's not something I'm ever going to understand. Someone who thinks that they, because of their skin color, are better than someone else. So yeah, I just feel like there's that weird, strange connotation that people with lighter skin have in Latin America. The other thing is that within Latin American or Mexican, excuse me, cinema, when Roma came out, a lot of people, I spoke to a friend of mine who's a filmmaker in Mexico, and he said that a lot of people didn't think it was that big of a deal that she was nominated, even if they weren't being mean, because the history of Mexican cinema does have indigenous representation in it, but television in Mexico doesn't. And so they were like, if she had starred in a TV show that had aired on Mexico, people would be losing their minds, but because she was in a movie, they're like, oh, all right, and again, I still find that strange. I think she's beautiful. I think she's so talented and amazing. I don't care what anybody says, but I'm so happy that he was, and Tenoch was not even, he didn't even audition for the movie. He was offered the role.
wow,
And I think that one thing I love about him is that he's challenging so many of these strange norms within Mexico. The people who don't like him there don't like him because he speaks out against homophobia and racism and colorism and femicide, which is a huge problem in Mexico. He's super supportive of marginalized communities, and people for some reason find that challenging. Racists find that challenging, is what I'm saying. So yeah, I'm just really glad that it reminds me of a video that someone once, they were interviewing people in Japan about whether or not they cared or were excited about the Ghost in the Shell movie with Scarlett Johansson, and they were all like, "Oh, cool!" And people here like lost their minds were upset. They're like, "Oh, how can this be? And it's not an Asian woman," and blah blah blah. And the difference I found is that people in Japan are used to seeing Japanese cinema. They have many heroes, many superheroes and things who are Japanese. So for them to see one of like an anime remake from America, they're like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever."
yeah,
But that speaks to how big the United States is and how much representation and diversity is needed within this country in film and in TV.
right. And I think that something that you said kind of resonated with me because, when you said, possibly people in Mexico weren't as excited as Latinos here. As a Chicano, I don't speak Spanish, so I don't get to see as much of the television or the movies that are produced or created in Mexico, and so I don't have all of those movies that we have representation of there. I mean, there are a few that kind of transcend the border and get into pop culture mainstream here, but I mean, I can count on my hand, how many positive, roles have been given to Latinos in the United States in American movies, and I think that's why for me it was so emotional to see a Latino in the role. Especially an indigenous dark person, but also just like I know there's something that I don't know, it's so great that it's not only a Latino, but someone that is so connected to their roots and to the culture that is like aspirational. I think for me is that
Yeah.
that obviously was taken away for so many of us, and that it to see what could have been with his kingdom, but also to see the language and the beauty of what we had and what we have is something that's special as well.
Yeah,
Um,
he has a line in the movie that I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's something about Spanish being like an awful language.
yeah,
And I was like, oh, this is so interesting. People are going to lose their shit. But like, I thought it was so because what I tell people sometimes, if it comes up every once in a while, like someone will say like, oh, well, I've been told that I'm not as Latino as someone else because I don't speak Spanish or whatever. And I'm like, the language that you speak has zero, in my opinion, to do with your ethnicity because of the circumstances of how you grew up or how you were raised. I tell them, remember that our ancestors did not speak Spanish and they were not Catholic either. you know? So
yeah,
like, I don't know what to tell you. How far back do you want to go? If it's about tradition and if it's about familial honor and whatever, it's like, okay, well, go back a few more generations then.
mm, yeah,
So yeah. Wasn't
yeah.
it, I'm sorry, but wasn't it so cool that whole scene with like the Spanish, um, like I don't know what it's called, like that villa or whatever, and it was like burning, and when the kid Namor like rises up into the sky, I got chills. It was so cool.
It was so awesome. It is for me personally, due to my life experience. Um, it's interesting because I was raised very Catholic. I went to a private Catholic school from kindergarten through high school. I was very religious growing up, and so it's not easy for me to let go of that. And so it I don't know, it's not hurtful, it's just like it's hard because you have I'm not a religious person now, but it's like it's still the remnants of like that Catholic guilt of
It becomes a
like that.
cultural thing just as much as a spiritual thing,
Mhm.
which is why it's hard to let go. Like
Yeah,
a friend of mine, that same filmmaker in Mexico, he was like, "Oh, I'm Catholic because I'm Mexican, but I don't go to church." And I'm like, okay, I understand, but it's so funny because for me, growing up Mormon, like Mormonism is tied heavily to my Mexican ancestry too,
mhm.
because every like my parents met because my dad was a Mormon missionary in Mexico,
Yeah,
and um it, the Mormonism is the second largest and fastest growing religion throughout all of Latin America because they teach that the Book of Mormon was written in Central America, So for me, it's hard to separate that. And my friend Chucho's like, I can't even imagine Mormonism having anything to do with Mexico.
yeah, uh,
So yeah, I just find it interesting. The idea of, a Mayan religion or an Aztec religion, and then you compile on top of that like Catholicism, and then you add Mormonism. It's like, okay, well, I guess we just got to believe what we want to believe.
yeah. Well, and the thing that is also interesting and like that I think Latinos have to deal with is that the vast majority of us aren't all indigenous, that we are a byproduct of colonization, and as much as we may love or hate it, we are a mixture of the colonizers with the indigenous people. And it's like there's those TikToks and it's like when you're like pointing at the colonizer and then it's like a mirror and it's like pointing at yourself, and it's like that is like a really weird mental thing to kind of tackle.
Yeah.
It's like, your identity of like knowing the history and knowing how you became, but still trying to be proud of who you are and have some sort of validity to your identity. Like, are you Mexican? Are you Chicano? Are you indigenous? Do you get to call yourself indigenous? Is your ancestry? It's such a um I don't know. It's so complicated. Whereas other people get to just be black or get to be Asian, or I think that to be Latino is like, I don't know. It's such an undefinable thing.
I think I hear a lot of similarities in the way that um, the Philippines was colonized by the Spanish for a while too. So a lot of people who are Filipino, I think, feel like they have some of those same, exactly what you're talking about. Like, there's Spanish, and then there's like Tagalog, and there's English, and what do I, which one do I speak at what time? And, so yeah, I just think, that having this representation in my mind, can only do good for Marvel, because we, as Latinos, are the largest ethnic minority group in the country with the least amount of representation. But what I find interesting is that the Latinx community spends more money on movie ticket sales every weekend than any other community.
Yeah. I think it's like 25%.
It's 25%. So it's an entire quarter of the movie going public. And we were an entire quarter of the tickets sold for the opening weekend of Thor: Love and Thunder. And that has like what? Maybe a Latino in it? I don't know. It's mostly Scandinavian white people, right? So like it's Thor. And so I just find it interesting. I think that when there's a movie about, let's say, Mexicans, and let's say it doesn't have a huge budget or get a huge promotion, sure, it might pass a lot of people by and a lot of people don't see it. But when Disney makes a movie like Coco, and then it makes more money in China than all of every Pixar movie combined has ever made there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing Chinese about it. That to me tells me something. And it had a huge marketing money machine behind it. Same with all these Marvel movies. So I feel like so many people getting to see this culture, and I think is good. And also so many more Latinos knowing about it and wanting to go support it could only, I think, help it make more money. Mm-hmm. Which is a good sign towards, sure, we'll do a Namor movie.
So aside from the movie, I think we've got a good idea of how we both have felt about it. Yeah. Because you work in the comic industry, I'm curious, how do you feel about characters that are created that are Latino in origin versus characters that either have an iteration that are Latino? So let's say like a Miles Morales, or not Latino, but I just had an example and it went out of my head. But when they make a character have like a person of color version, do you think that there's a difference between us getting a character that has a history and then making it our own, or would you like to see us have our own characters with our own origin story that is fully Latino?
I think this is a really good question. My answer is ideally I would like both, right? And I think, how do I put this? So a friend of mine, Steve Orlando, he's a writer for Marvel and DC. He had this great kind of quote, this thing that he mentioned when we were talking once. I was interviewing him for a thing, and he said something about how when he was at DC, he created hundreds of new characters, queer characters and characters of color, and and where are they? Because they're new, they don't have the benefit of a long history attached to the character. So unless a writer speaks up and says, I want to use this character, please let me use this character, they're not going to get used again. So like I created new Mexican character, 3 maybe, yeah, in Reptile. I gave him 2 cousins. Ava's been in one comic or a few comics that she shows up at Strange Academy. Julian's shown up in only one other one because Luciano Vecchio asked, I think, to use him. But having a character with a long history, say like Iceman, mm-hmm. who then comes out as gay, I hear all the time, why can't they just make a new gay character? Well, I don't think it means as much sometimes to people because of that reason. Right. And so now it adds a new, well, I don't know what metaphor you want to use, adds a new layer or peels a layer off like an onion of behind the curtain of this character. Yeah. But doesn't that make comics that you read where his relationship with Kitty is not going so well, doesn't that like add a new kind of level to first time you see Iceman, he's sliding down a pole, like come on. So like I feel like, to me, I'm in the camp of ideally both, because I think both is it offers you a chance to create more and create new characters. But I'm all for like changing that up, especially because if you're someone who's like, this isn't my Namor, well, then go read the comics.
Mhm.
They haven't disappeared. They're there for you. That's your version. That's fine. But aren't we like in the middle of a whole bunch of like multiverse movies? So why can't we have like a ton of different versions? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Everybody should be able to get something. And someone who's upset that say Namor is Mexican, I would just say, no one wants to play with a kid who won't share their toys. So if you're like, no, he can only be white, then why do you care about that? I don't understand that, but yeah, like, does that answer your question?
No, it does, and it makes a lot of sense because, as a fan who like buys comics, and I'm the first one to like investigate every character, and if like they're any sort of sliver of tan, I'm like, oh my god, do they validate that they're Latino? Do they say like, is there anything, any little crumb that I can hold on to that tells me that they're a person of color, not Italian or not, whatever. And so I would support an origin story of a new character, but I know that there are other people that like they only have so much money to pick up a new release on Wednesday. And it's like, are you going to buy the Spider-Man or like this comic book that you don't know? And I do see how
there's a reason.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why we have 1,000 Batman movies and a gajillion Spider-Man movies, right? Because people just want to see the same thing. They're familiar. They don't want to invest in something unfamiliar, original, or new.
Right.
So that's why I think it's important to, I guess, if you want to say, alter those characters to include more diversity. I think that is one reason why.
Yeah. So for those that may have seen our last interview with you, we know some of the projects that you've previously worked on. I'm curious, what are you currently up to? What are you working on
So
today?
as of today, the recording of this episode, my last issue, my final issue of Nova Restoration is up on the Marvel Unlimited app.
Nice.
And so it's 6 issues. They're very short, so you can read the whole thing in like one go. But that's the story with Nova, Viv Vision, and a new alien character that I created. That is one of the most recent things I've written. I have written a whole entire another book that I can't talk about. And I'm pitching 2 other books, but I would love to write more for Marvel or DC. I get a lot of enjoyment out of doing that, and I've had really great editors working on those projects. I would love to do a children's picture book featuring Reptile about dinosaurs. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah.
But I have stories for some of the original characters that I've created. I would write anything they throw at me, so that's fine. There's another great Mexican superhero named Hummingbird that I think has a really fascinating story that is ripe for like her own series. But yeah, I don't know. That's pretty much it. Check out the Nova story I wrote. But yeah, I swear I'm working. I just have a few things I can't talk about.
Yeah, so we get that. We talked to Maria Wolf a couple weeks ago, and she had a project that she's like, I've always wanted to create it, but I can't share it. And she's like, no, I can share. I'm like, no. Like, I don't want anyone to steal your idea or like keep a secret. We can wait. We'll hold with bated breath. But we get that not everything can be out in the open.
I will say that there's a great series called Mezzo that's put out by Wave Blue World, and it's all Mesoamerican fantasy, series. It's great, and I did variant covers for all the issues.
Oh, nice.
So I would check out that series. It's really fun. It's a really good read. And then there's also an anthology that just came out recently called Young Men in Love, which is queer romance. It's like a Harlequin romance anthology, but all about queer men. And I wrote a story in that called Living, which was drawn. All the art was done by Bradley Clayton. So those are 2 other things you could check out, I guess. And you'd be looking at and discovering the art and stories of a lot of other people. Reptile's available in a full trade now that you can get. So that's some other stuff that I guess you could pick up.
Excellent. I definitely will. One thing that reminded me of going back to Black Panther is how did you feel about the way they handled Okoye's lesbian relationship with the other member of the
Oh, it's not. So it wasn't Okoye. It's the other Dora Milaje that's always hanging out with her. I don't remember her name. I think she's played by Florence Kasumba. And at the end of the
yeah.
movie, she just kind of like kisses her forehead and is like, "My
I could
love."
have sworn
Right?
it was the main the general.
No, because no, it's another. Here, I'm gonna look it up now. 'Cause, um, I think her name is Florence Kasumba. She was also in the TV show. Which one was it? Hawkeye. She was in Civil War. She was in Black Panther, obviously. A-I-O. That's her character's name.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's well, so that tells you everything right there. Is that she has I love Michaela Cole. I was very excited for her to be in this movie. I loved chewing gum. I love, I like everything she does. And so I was really, really excited to see her in this movie. And she said it was important for her to play this character because that character is queer. But it's also tacked on at the end in a scene that is already being removed so they can release the movie in like Kuwait or something, um, which is just gross to me. But she had much more of a relationship with Okoye in the movie than she did with the person she was supposed to be with.
Well, maybe, and I think that maybe that's why I thought that was the relationship there, and that I misconstrued. But I had heard that they were going to introduce a relationship, and I think that it's in the comics as well.
Yeah, it is.
And I was disappointed, just like the gay character in the Eternals, where this big brouhaha over this kiss that was same-sex kiss that was shared, and it was like a split second, or the kiss in Buzz Lightyear. It's like the smallest like little thing, and yet there's still such a big controversy over it. But I am still waiting for, that's the other part of my, I guess, the communities that I belong to, is like I'm still waiting for like a really cool queer superhero to come out.
I think with the casting of Joe Locke from Heartstopper and Agatha, Coven of Chaos or whatever, I think that's what her show's called. People are suspecting he's playing Wiccan. Mm-hmm. And I think Wiccan fans, will riot if that character is not portrayed as openly queer the whole time.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying that Agatha is going to be like the gayest Marvel show ever, and I'm here for it. Yeah, and it's got Emma Caulfield again, who was in WandaVision. She was Anya on Buffy, and it's going to have like Aubrey Plaza in it, and now Joe Locke. So I'm excited. I think that Wiccan and Hulkling might get introduced in this series, and then I think they would have the full roster of like the Young Avengers. But yeah, I'm waiting for it to be how badass if like Ayo and Aneka would have been shown fighting Talokanil together, then it's and they have some sort of line where she says "my love" at that point. That wouldn't be so easy to cut out,
Right. Yeah.
So
I wasn't aware that they were cutting it out. That's really disappointing.
I mean, that's what I read today online. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, you can see how easily it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. It was the fastest little like nothing that I was just so disappointed. I was like, what? There it went.
It makes me really, even so, it makes me happy that Michaela Cole wanted to do the role, because she said that the reason she agreed to it was because the character is queer, because her family is from Ghana, and it was going to be shown there, and she wanted people in Ghana to see a queer character, because there's still so many laws there against homosexuality. So, and Michaela Cole was my like favorite guest judge on RuPaul's Drag Race UK. So I love that she's so supportive of the queer community, and I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah, I almost feel bad for actors that want to represent their community, and then the studio or the filmmakers cut it short, and I feel that hurt for them. Like I think of the actress that played Psylocke, and how they kind of did her dirty as well. Like as an Asian woman, like she was like, oh, I get to be this badass. Like, she did all this sword training, and then you watch the film and you're like, oh, what happened? Like, and I feel like God, I could just feel the disappointment for them. Like here they
Yeah.
get to, they love the character. It speaks to them. It represents, something really powerful for them. And then they see the edited film and they're like, ugh, I tried. I
Well,
tried.
I think that's because you've got potentially directors, editors, other people working on the film who don't understand the importance of what some of that person's performance could mean to people.
Right.
Because they have the privilege of being like, coming at it from a white perspective where they're like, oh, well, they're just fighting. They're just whatever. Cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't
Yeah.
know. I love the movie. I want to see it again. I would think it'd be really cool. Not that I know anything. If a Namor movie focused on basically a stretched out version of what we saw about his history. Imagine like a whole civilization of underwater Talocans like whaling against Spanish conquistadors. Like boats are coming in and then whales are just knocking them over and stuff. I think it'd be awesome.
So that was probably one of my favorite little tiny scenes is like when the orca is like goes by really quick. Orcas are my favorite animal like of all time. And some of my friends are like, oh, you're evil because they're so mean. And I'm like, but they're so smart.
They're
and
just animals.
Yeah, and they have a smidge of like when they like throw seals and like they're playing with them and they're like
Yeah.
they're torturing them and that they're kind of like it's fun for them. So there's like a little bit of like evil in them, but they're just so like amazing. I don't know. That was like it was like so many things coming together, like an indigenous superhero riding an orca. Well, I was just like, what the
Have
fuck?
you seen
Awesome.
I'm not like a huge fan of Funko, but the pops, but like they're cute and all. But like, have you seen the one of Namor riding the orca?
I did. I have to get it. And there's another one I think that it's in pre-order of him in like the full like
Yeah, battle suit.
and I'm like, fuck, I hate pops. Like, I mean, obviously I'm not afraid of buying toys, but like pops are just like I know
They're a quick money
yeah.
grab.
And it's like and it's so like nostalgia and your emotions for like what you grew up on, but it works. Like I see them like I have all the like lucha libre versions of superheroes that they came out with.
Yeah, I've got like a bunch of the drag race ones because I'm like, well, who else is making drag race figurines?
Yeah. And
So
I
that's
honestly I
why.
feel and I'm sure you feel the same way. Like I feel this huge responsibility as a consumer for everything that they release. I have to show up and buy. Like during Latino Hispanic Heritage Month when DC put out those horrible covers and there was they fixed one of them and all of that stuff and I was like, well, even if they put out the one with like a taco, I have to buy it because I have to show DC that even though it's a stupid cover, I'm still want to buy it. I still want the Mexican Green Lantern on a cover, and they fixed it, but
That's what we were saying about the movie, right? Is that like even if it was bad, we have to support it so that we get more.
yeah.
It's tough to think that way, but we have to.
Yeah, I don't want to get you in trouble, but because this is your work or whatever. But one of the things when that happened, I was just thinking, how did DC like who came up with the idea that like food would be the common theme and then to be done in like they had Hot Girl working as a restaurant carrying like food and like that would be like the best way to show Hot Girl being Latina. Like I was just like, it was so awkward. Like
So, well, let me preface this with I have no clue because I've only ever written one thing for DC, right? I'm not like on staff there. so so the answer is I don't know. But this is an interesting conversation to have. I keep saying that, but it's true. Because some of those covers, I think this might be controversial. I think one or two of them were fine.
mm,
Right? Like, big deal. Who doesn't love tacos? We all love tacos, right? However, when all of them are about food, then that's not good. If they had kept the one with like the Mexican flag,
mhm.
and if they had done one where like say Blue Beetle's costume, they had like a Day of the Dead variation of it or something, like all decorated with the mask, I'm trying to draw that still right now. I think that would be badass. And then you have one where someone's like eating tacos, great. Maybe that's not the best one, but I think that because there wasn't a variety of things there, that's why that happened. The message that's being sent is, oh, Latino means food, and that's all we know about Latino culture. Okay, oh, great. Um, what about a Puerto Rican character? Put them on the cover of the comic and have them at the Puerto Rican Pride Parade.
Mhm.
Like I don't understand why here in like what 10 seconds I feel like I'm able to come up with some ideas that may not be usable, but at least it's a jumping off point where people can brainstorm and go, yeah, what if we go in this direction and this one could be like this. I i would want to know how many people of color or Latinos were involved in the editorial process of these covers. I'm not saying none,
Yeah.
especially because I have a friend who is Mexican, like me, Mexican American, and they feel like so much of their cultural identity being Mexican is tied to food. So they were like, I feel really weird about these covers because everybody's hating them. And I feel like, you know, for me, some of them are fine. And I tried to reassure my friend, like, yeah, I feel that way too. Some of them are okay. Some of them probably should be different though.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
So
agree. I think that they were goofy and awkward. Like Jessica Cruz, like kicking a bunch of people's ass, and then like a weird, I don't even know what it was, like a burrito taco.
I
Like,
don't either.
yeah, and because there's covers of like Spider-Man eating a slice of pizza, like Deadpool, chimichangas. Like, I get that, like bringing in a little bit of levity, but there's these incredibly talented, creative people, and that's what you came up with. It was like an afterthought. It was like, well, we could do a really cool cover, but how do we show that he's Mexican, or how do we show that she's Puerto Rican? And them just being like, I don't know, like what
So that's what I tried to do with Reptile was in the very first issue, I was like, well, this comic is for Mexicans. Sorry about it. So I have that him and his cousins go to eat tacos, right? So on the surface, if that's all you do, then you're like, oh, okay, come on. That's what you do with these Mexican characters. But he's with his cousin who's gay and he's buying fabric in Santee Alley. It shows Mexican businesses. It shows taco trucks and other kinds of food trucks. It shows the fashion district, which is in Los Angeles, which is very Mexican. So I wanted to be able to show these places and also have these characters who I was hoping would be well-rounded. Like Ava is very smart and talks about how she is a runner and likes to jog and all this other stuff amidst them getting tacos. I think if Beto's main personality trait is I like to eat tacos, and I hadn't included stuff like he's wearing a Selena t-shirt and he says that he loves anime. I just want him to feel like a real kid.
right.
And I think in doing that, you get a real kid who you can then get behind because they feel relatable, and it's just a perk that he's Mexican.
Yeah.
If
And
that
it,
makes
and
any
it felt
sense.
authentic, reading it,
Yeah.
it felt authentic. It didn't feel, like, and even the peppering in like the drag race, uh reference, it didn't feel like it was like, oh, this character's gay. Like, it was like a cool inside, like, if kind of a thing.
So
And
I have a weird feeling about that because in the first in the first issue, he does just have like, he likes to make clothes, and there's a poster of a male pop star on his wall and a Frida poster, and we're talking about Julian here.
Mhm.
And he does make a drag race reference. So yeah, you like, do you have to say he's gay? You just get it, right?
Right.
The funny thing about the drag race thing is that I wrote that in the script, and my editor didn't push back or anything, but we were talking about it, and I was like, look, Jubilee has mentioned that her favorite thing to do is curl up and watch Drag Race. Iceman has mentioned that he was a guest judge on Drag Race. Drag Race exists in Marvel. So I'm putting it in there. And she was like, okay. But it was a really interesting sort of lesson to learn because it made me very empathetic towards other writers because I didn't fully realize, I mean, I knew, but I just wasn't thinking about it, that I was writing characters and creating characters who were part of a system that where other people were going to write them in the future who are not me, and I would not have any say in what happens to them unless
Right.
I'm the one writing it, right? That was a little difficult to feel. But in the second issue, I believe, maybe the third, Julian's talking to his cousin and tells him a story about when he came out. And and my editor, she said, "Do you want him to say when I came out as gay?" And I was like, "Well, don't you think people get it? They know it." And she was like, "Sure, but if you don't establish that outright right now, then some other author down the line could be like, oh, well, when he came out as trans, or when he came out as bi, or when he can." And I was like, "Oh wow, yeah. If I do want that to be an integral part of his character, I might have to say it outright here." And what does that do for someone who was like, "Oh, I love that they didn't ever have to say it," you know? So it was a weird sort of balance that I had to be like, "Oh, okay, I guess I will," so I can establish that. So yeah, I don't know, but hey, I added a gay Marvel Mexican to the mix.
Yeah, and I think that it is kind of weird that there's part of people that are, disenfranchised, whether it be Mexican, gay, what have you, that they want to be seen as just like the regular people. Like, I don't want to have to be seen eating a taco, or I don't want to be seen, listening to Spanish music. But at the same time, there's like the kid that I was that was like looking for that validation that if you didn't put that in there, it's so ambiguous that you're like, wait, are they? Aren't they? Am I ever going to find out if they're like me, if they are gay, if they are Latino? Like, so you do have to like hammer it out and say like, yes, this character is this. And it is very important because there are little kids that are like waiting for that validation.
Yeah, imagine watching Saved by the Bell in the 90s and being like, is AC Slater Mexican?
Yes.
They never say. They
Yeah.
do in the college years finally, but yeah, you got to either that's what started this whole conversation, wasn't it? I was like, "Hey, we have to take our representation crumbs
Yeah.
wherever we get them."
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Not that Black Panther was a crumb, it was a very big full meal.
yeah, it definitely was. I feel like there's a line in there about the Noche Huerta being a full meal, but I'm not funny enough to or clever enough to come up with it.
Did
But
you see? Okay, well, okay, I'll be dirty and end it this way. Did you see? If you haven't seen it, go to my Twitter. And earlier today, I retweeted someone who posted a production photo of a still of the photo that's going of Namor where he's like standing on like that beach, and there's other Talokans like jumping into the water, and he's like kind of looking away. So he's standing to the side, and it's the picture like of where how they filmed it, and then it's the final film product next to it. And the tweet that someone posted was, imagine being the person whose job it is at Marvel to CGI out all the dongs. And when you look at it, you can see that, yeah, someone smoothed out Namor's crotch.
oh wow.
And it's like, what have we gotten to the point where even just the insinuation that man might have, something under his underwear is too offensive? Like, really?
Yeah, I mean, they're a straight white man can only handle so much. Like Wakandans, Talokans, Tenoch Huerta, like their head would have exploded if then the hint of a brown penis would have been there. It just would have,
Yeah.
it would have exploded. But yeah, I need more set pictures. I feel like there's not enough. Like I've been scouring the internet for like a wallpaper on my phone, and there's some good ones.
You've seen the one of him like laying down on the couch, right? Like with his feet up.
I haven't. The best shot that I've seen so far is him like, from my preference, him like looking to the side in the water with like his spear. That's like so far my favorite picture of him. But I need more. I want to see more.
No, send me a DM.
I think a book needs to be released of all the behind the scenes of
Well, speaking of, are they going to do an Art of Wakanda Forever book? Because I think they do them for the Marvel movies, and I would totally buy that to see all of the concept character art and stuff for Talokan.
I loved how they did I think in the film it's Namora, not Namorita, but
Yeah.
her look, and then Atuma, they were
Yeah.
both amazing
So
looking.
cool.
Like,
Yeah. Can we just, before we, go, can we just shout out to Mabel Cadena because I love her. She was in a film on Netflix called El Baile de los 41, The Dance of the 41, which is a true historical account in Mexico City in the early 1900s of 41 men who were arrested at a house party for wearing drag. And she plays the wife of she plays the daughter of the president of Mexico whose husband was at this party, right? And it was amazing to see her in this role because she is an indigenous woman and the president had a child with an indigenous woman.
oh wow,
And for her audition tape for Black Panther, Mabel Cadena sent in a video of her reading a poem in Nahuatl
oh wow.
and then a video of her riding a horse with no saddle, no bridle through a river. And Ryan Coogler was like, I think we found her. I think we're good. I think we got her. And then not only did she have to learn Mayan for this movie, but she also didn't speak any English. So she had to learn English.
Wow.
And she had to, learn all the swimming and learn how to hold her breath for like 6 minutes. So
Yes.
that's a lot to do for a role for a film. And it's
I saw that her interview where she said that she beat everyone, that she could hold her breath for 6 minutes.
But
what the hell?
I can't think of many film roles. No, I'm sure there are some. I can't think of many film roles where someone had to learn 2 languages just to play the role. Can you imagine?
She's amazing. She's gorgeous.
Incredible.
I love the way that they designed her character. It's perfect. It just is so good. I love her.
Did you notice oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm interrupted you.
No. I just am, fanboying over her. She's amazing.
I was gonna say, did you notice, because some people didn't, that when the Talocaneals are underwater, they're not blue?
Right. Yeah, I did notice that.
I loved that so much. Because I also think like, well, that's cool. They get to show, a darker skin color to have that representation for Latinos in there as well. If they'd all been blue, I think we would have fallen into the trap of like, okay, so like Zoe Saldana is a Latina, but she's playing a green alien, like stuff like that. So I'm glad that they got to show their skin color as well underwater.
Yeah. And I think that was purposeful, and I'm so thankful for that because just I was going to bring up Zoe Saldana that it's like, oh, Latina, but she's green, like
Salma Hayek, but she's playing like a god. She's not playing a Mexican, right? Yeah. Same with America Chavez. Like, she's speaking Spanish, but she's from like the utopian parallel. There's no like Mexico there. Like, it's not that I know of. So I was just glad that this character in Namor was able to say, I am from Mesoamerica. We had to leave. Yeah.
Well, and that I collect all the America Chavez comics, and that was one of the things that I feel like we were a little bit shortchanged, like, not to kind of expand, to lengthen our conversation, but where it's like, oh yeah, she's Latina, but she's an alien, but like her, like, it was just like I want someone that's from Arizona, that is Mexican American, that is not like from an alternate universe, not whatever, like, just let them be Mexican American, period. Like, that's it.
Reptile Disney Plus series.
I'm all for
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I hopefully, I think America's character in the MCU will evolve and get bigger. I think it's definitely a symptom of, like, do you remember when Wanda first made her appearance and people were like, that's not the Scarlet Witch. Who is this Avril Lavigne looking, like, walking around? And now, she's had a place to progress to, and now she's full on Scarlet Witch. So I would hope that, like, a lot of these characters progress to the point where, they are kind of more of a version, sort of representing the comics, I guess. But I guess it takes a while to get there. So
yeah. Well, here's hoping, and I hope that more opportunity comes your way, that you can continue your success in bringing us fans So my Italian Greyhound's like trying to turn my laptop off. I'm like, I'm trying to give someone a compliment. You're going to ruin it anyway.
Oh,
she's very opulent. That's a
yeah.
Paris is Burning inside joke. But anyway,
Mhm.
what was I saying? Anyway, that you get more opportunity to bring us great characters, representation. I love your work. I've told you this before. Please, everyone, go and support Terry. It's very important that we, help let the big companies, independent publishers, Marvel, DC, whoever know that we want stories from Latino creators, that we use that money that we readily spend on Thor on stories about us. So please go and support and buy all of his stuff. And once again, thank you for joining us on Pop Cult X. It's always a pleasure talking to you, having that insider knowledge that you have, and also as just a pop culture, I think, geek as well. So thank you once again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really mean it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.